At 65, I never imagined I'd receive a call from debt collectors chasing my future son-in-law for a $50,000 gambling debt. But that was only the first betrayal I would uncover. Stay with this story until the very last moment. The ending will astonish you. Name was Ethan Miller, and I'm 65 years old. For decades, I thought I'd seen everything life had to offer. I lost my beloved Eleanor 5 years ago, leaving me with only our daughter, Idiki Samantha, who is 32 and had become the absolute center of my universe. I worked for 40 years as a civil engineer, building not only skyscrapers, but also a solid financial legacy that would allow my family to live with dignity. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. March 5th, 2024, began like any ordinary Tuesday in my office in Midtown, New York. I had just finished reviewing some blueprints when my phone rang at 2:30 p.m. Initially, I thought it was another potential client, but the voice on the other end sent a chill down my spine. Mr. Miller, I'm calling from Express Collections. We're looking for Butzel David Foster. Your number appears as a reference in his documents. David, my Samantha's fiancé, the man who was supposedly going to make her happy on April 20th, the date we had planned a dream wedding at the Chau Grand Renaissance Manor with a budget of $90,000 that I was fully funding. What kind of collection, I asked, though a knot in my stomach already warned me I wouldn't want to hear the answer. Online gambling debts, sir. The current amount is $50,000, with interest accumulating daily. Can you put us in touch with him? I hung up the phone with trembling hands. For a moment, I thought it had to be a mistake, a mix-up of names. David worked at a reputable marketing firm, had a decent salary, and drove a new car. How could he possibly have debts like that? But then I remembered small details I had ignored. The times I had seen him nervously checking his cell phone during family dinners, the strange comments about online investments, when I asked him about finances, the way he avoided talking about money when we planned the wedding expenses. That same afternoon, I decided to investigate discreetly. Samantha had been home the previous Sunday, and I recalled she had left some papers on the dining room table while we reviewed wedding details. Among those documents, I found bank statements she had forgotten. As I looked them over, my heart sank. Regular transfers to gambling websites. FanDuel, BetMGM, DraftKings. The amounts were astronomical. In the last 6 months, David had spent over $32,000 on online betting. And the worst part was that many of those transactions were made using additional cards linked to Samantha's accounts. My precious daughter was unknowingly financing her fiancé's addiction. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake until 4 a.m., staring at the ceiling and trying to process the information. David didn't just have a severe gambling problem. He was also using Samantha to feed his vice. I remembered the conversation we had 3 weeks earlier when he asked me to co-sign a loan to improve his credit score before the marriage. I had agreed without hesitation, trusting him as the man who would make my daughter happy. Now I understood it had all been a calculated strategy. I woke up on Wednesday, March 6th, with a painful but necessary clarity. During my usual coffee and milk breakfast, I made a decision that would change everything. I had to confront Samantha with the truth, no matter how painful it was. I couldn't allow my daughter to marry a man who was already betraying her financially and emotionally. A father's love compelled me to act, even if it meant facing her initial fury. I carefully prepared all the documents I had found, made copies of the bank statements, and noted the collection agency's numbers. If I was going to have this conversation with Samantha, I needed irrefutable proof. As I organized everything on my desk, a question tormented me. How much more did I not know about David Foster? The answer to that question would arrive very soon, and it would be much worse than I had ever imagined. I truly wonder, if you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to be quiet, to maintain peace, or would you dare to face everything to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story is like a candle that can light the way for someone else. Thursday, March 8th, dawned overcast over Bryan, Manhattan. As if the sky anticipated the storm about to break out in my family. I had spent 2 nights awake, organizing every document, every piece of evidence that would demonstrate the reality about David. At 6 p.m., I called Samantha. "Dad, how are you?" David and I were just reviewing the final catering confirmations. Her voice sounded cheerful, completely unaware of what was about to happen. "Samantha, I need you to come home tonight. We have to talk about something very important regarding the wedding." There was a pause. "Did something happen with the Grand Renaissance Manor? Any issue with the menu?" "It's not about the vendors, honey. It's about David. Please, come alone." The tone of my voice must have alerted her, because she immediately became defensive. "What about David? Dad, I hope you're not going to start again with your comments about him. Samantha, please just come." At 8:30 p.m., I heard Samantha's keys in the door. I had brewed coffee and arranged all the documents on the living room table, organized chronologically. When she entered, I immediately noticed her expression of worry mixed with irritation. "All right, Dad, what is all this drama about?" she asked, dropping her purse on the sofa where she used to sit as a child and tell me about her school days. "Please, sit down." I pointed to the chair across from me. "What I'm about to show you will completely change your perspective on the man you plan to marry." Samantha rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, Dad, seriously, are you going to try to find fault with David again?" "I'm not looking for faults, Samantha. I found them by accident." I slid the first document toward her, the bank statement with the gambling transactions. "Can you explain to me what these transfers mean?" I watched her expression gradually change as she read. Her eyes moved from left to right, processing each line, each amount. The color drained from her face. This must be a bank error," she murmured. "David doesn't gamble. He would have told me." "Samantha, there's more." I showed her the second document, the list of calls from the collection agencies. "I received this call yesterday. David gave them my number as a reference for his debts." She took the paper with trembling hands. $50,000. This can't be real." "It's very real, honey. And look at this." I pointed to the dates of the most recent transactions. Many of these bets were made with cards linked to your accounts. David has been using your money to fund his addiction. Samantha stood up abruptly, walking toward the window that overlooked the small garden where Eleanor used to tend her roses. No, this is impossible. David and I talk about everything. He would have told me if he had financial problems." "Did he tell you about these debts when he asked you to open joint accounts? Did he mention his gambling problem when he asked me to co-sign his loan?" She spun around toward me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You're exaggerating everything. Maybe he gambled online a few times like everyone else. That doesn't make him an addict." "Samantha, he's lost over $32,000 in 6 months. That's not gambling a few times. That's an illness." "You don't know him like I do," she yelled, and her voice reminded me of when she was 15 and passionately defending lost causes. David is good. He works hard. He loves me. I stood up slowly, approaching her. Of course he loves you, Samantha, but he loves gambling more. And if he marries you without resolving this problem, he will destroy your financial and emotional life. So what do you propose I do? Cancel my wedding 6 weeks before the date because my paranoid father found some bank statements? I propose you postpone the wedding for 6 months. Give David time to seek professional help, to resolve his debts, to prove that he can change. Samantha remained silent for several minutes, looking out the window. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold and distant. I'm not going to postpone my wedding over unfounded suspicions. They're not suspicions, they're documented facts. They're papers you found digging through my private things, she snapped. And even if all this were true, David is my fiancé, my future husband. Problems are solved together, not by running away from them. I felt as if I'd been punched in the chest. Samantha, listen to me carefully. If you insist on getting married on April 20th without David first resolving these problems, I will be forced to withdraw my financial support for the wedding. Her eyes filled with a fury I had never seen before. You're blackmailing me. I'm protecting you. You're meddling in my life like you always have, she shouted. Ever since Mom died, you think you can control every aspect of my existence. I'm 32 years old, Dad. And precisely because of that, you should have the maturity to recognize when someone is manipulating you. Samantha picked up her purse and headed for the door. I'm not listening to any more of this. David and I will get married on April 20th, with or without your money. And how will you pay for the missing $90,000? With more online bets? She stopped at the threshold without turning back. We'll find a way. Samantha, please, I'm just asking you to talk to David about this, to show him these documents. If he truly loves you, he will admit his problem and seek help. She finally turned around, and the coldness in her eyes broke my heart. You know what, Dad? I'm going to talk to David, but not to confront him about your accusations. I'm going to tell him how my own father is trying to sabotage my happiness 6 weeks before my wedding. And with those words, she walked out of my house, leaving me alone with the documents scattered on the table and a silence that weighed like a tombstone. I didn't know then that I had just lit the fuse of a bomb that would explode 4 days later. The following 4 days were the longest of my life. After Samantha stormed out of my house, I didn't receive a single call from her. Silence had settled between us like an invisible but impenetrable barrier. Every time I picked up the phone to call her, something stopped me. I knew she needed time to process the information, but I also feared what David might be telling her in my absence. On Friday, March the 9th, my sister, Teresa, visited me at the office. At 62, Teresa had always been my closest confidant, especially after Eleanor's death. Her intuition for reading people was extraordinary, and from day one, she had expressed reservations about David. Ethan, you look terrible, she said as she sat across from my desk. What happened with Samantha? I told her everything. The discovery of the debts, the confrontation, Samantha's defensive reaction. Teresa listened in silence, nodding occasionally with a grave expression. I knew something was off with that guy, she murmured when I finished. Remember our Christmas dinner? When we talked about your company's expansion, David asked Sean too many questions about your income and properties. He seemed calculated. Why didn't you say anything? Because I didn't have concrete proof, just a feeling. But now that you mention the gambling, she paused as if remembering something important. Ethan, last month, I saw David at the local mall. He was with a very young blonde woman. It wasn't Samantha. My stomach clenched. Are you sure? Completely. At first, I thought about going over to say hello, but something about his attitude stopped me. The way he touched her, the way he looked at her. It was not the way an engaged man should behave with another woman. Tell me whether you have parents, grandparents, or older family members who deserve more respect than they currently receive from their families. Alternatively, tell me if you yourself are going through a situation in which you're not appreciated as much as you truly deserve. On Monday, March 12th, I decided I had waited long enough. At 10 a.m., I called Samantha. I needed to know if she had talked to David about the debts, if they had sought professional help, if they had at least acknowledged that a problem existed. "What do you want, Dad?" Her voice was cold, distant. "I want to know if you talked to David about what I showed you on Thursday." There was a long pause. "Yes, I talked to him, and he explained everything to me. Those transactions you saw aren't gambling. They're investments in cryptocurrencies and online trading. David is trying to generate extra income for our future." I felt as if I'd been slapped. "Samantha, the companies collecting from him are recognized betting houses. FanDuel is not a cryptocurrency platform. You don't understand anything about modern finance," she exploded. "David showed me his apps, his investment strategies. Everything is under control." "Honey, please." "No, Dad, stop it. David told me you called him on Friday, pretending to be a potential client to ask him questions about his finances. Is that true?" I remained silent. I had indeed called the company where David supposedly worked to verify his position and salary. Samantha just wanted to confirm, "You're spying on my fiancé. You're trying to destroy my relationship. I'm trying to save you from a mistake that will ruin your life. My life is mine to ruin if I want," she shouted. "And David is not going to ruin it because he loves me and I love him. Something you can't understand because you've been alone and bitter ever since Mum died." Her words were like daggers. Eleanor had been the love of my life, and her absence still hurt every day. But to use her memory as a weapon against me— "Samantha, listen to me very carefully," I said, maintaining my calm with superhuman effort. "I'm going to give you one last chance. If David doesn't seek professional help for his gambling problem before March 20th, I will cancel all payments related to the wedding, the $90,000 I've invested. You're giving me an ultimatum. I'm offering you a dignified way out before it's too late. And if I refuse, then you'll have to finance your own wedding." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear her agitated breathing over the phone. "You can't do this to me," she finally whispered. "I can and I will. All the contracts are in my name. All payments come out of my accounts. If David doesn't show he's seeking real help for his problems before March 20th, I withdraw my financial support completely." "Dad, please. 8 days, Samantha. That's all I ask. 8 days for him to seek professional help." She hung up without saying goodbye. I couldn't eat dinner that night. I stayed up until 4 a.m. in my study, looking at photos of Samantha when she was a little girl. I remembered when she was 8 and fell off her bike, crying not because of the pain, but because of the shame of falling in front of her friends. "It's okay, princess," I had told her then. "Bumps hurt, but they teach us to be more careful." Now, she was about to suffer a much harder blow, and I was the only one who could prevent it. Tuesday and Wednesday passed without news. Thursday morning, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Miller, it's David. I think we need to talk." His voice sounded different, less confident, more calculated. I'm listening. Look, Samantha is very upset about this whole situation. I don't understand why you're causing so much drama over something so insignificant. Insignificant? A $50,000 gambling debt seems insignificant to you? Those aren't bets, they're investments. David, let's stop playing games. I have the records from the betting houses. I know exactly what you've spent the money on. There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his tone had completely changed. All right, maybe I gambled a little more than I should have, but that doesn't mean I have a problem. And it definitely doesn't mean I'm going to hurt Samantha. You're already hurting her. You're using her accounts to fund your bets. Those are technical details. The money is ours. We're a couple. No, David, you're not married yet. And if things continue like this, you never will be. Are you threatening me? I'm giving you the same opportunity I gave Samantha. Seek professional help before March 20th. Prove you're taking this problem seriously, and everything will proceed as planned. And if I refuse, then you'll have to explain to Samantha why her $90,000 wedding turned into a $200 civil ceremony. David laughed, but it was a cold, calculated laugh. Mr. Miller, I think you're underestimating your daughter's love for me. Samantha has already chosen me over you. Do you really think she's going to change her mind over money? I hope you don't have to find out. Oh, but I think I will. That night, at 11:47 p.m., I received the message that would change everything forever. It was from Samantha and contained only one line. I'd rather lose my father than lose my husband. As I read those words over and over, I felt as if something definitively broke inside me. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the realization that David had won the first battle. But I hadn't even begun to fight the war. I'd rather lose my father than lose my husband. Those 10 words glowed on my cell phone screen like burning embers. It was 11:47 p.m. on March 12, 2024, and I had just received the most devastating blow of my 65 years. Not even when the doctors told me Eleanor wouldn't survive the cancer did I feel such deep, cutting pain. I remained motionless in my brown leather armchair, the one where Eleanor used to curl up with me on Sunday nights while we watched classic movies. The house was submerged in a deathly silence, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock that had belonged to my parents. I read the message a second time, then a third. Each reading was like receiving a fresh slap. My only daughter, the girl I had comforted during her nightmares, whom I had carried on my shoulders through every park in New York, whom I had applauded at every school recital, had just chosen a manipulative gambler over her own father. How had we gotten here? The phone vibrated again. For a hopeful moment, I thought Samantha had reconsidered, that she was writing to apologize, but it was another, longer message. David explained to me that you're jealous because I'm not your little girl anymore, that you can't accept someone else being more important in my life. He's right. Ever since Mum died, you've treated me like your wife, not your daughter. It's sick, Dad. You need psychological help, not us. My hands trembled as I held the device. Samantha's accusations were like poison injected directly into my veins. Jealous, sick, treating her like a wife. Each word was a dagger, wrapped in the cruelty that can only come from someone who knows exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. I rose from the armchair on wobbly legs and walked toward the window overlooking the backyard. Under the yellowish light of the street lamps, I could see Eleanor's roses, now withered by winter, but which would bloom again in the spring. As every year since her death, I had personally cared for every bush, watering them with the same dedication she had shown for decades. Was it true what David had told Samantha? Had I, in my grief over Eleanor's loss, projected an inappropriate emotional dependence onto my daughter? Doubt settled in my mind like a parasite, devouring my inner security. But then I remembered the bank statements, the calls from the debt collectors, the irrefutable figures. $50,000 in gambling debts were not the product of my jealousy or my imagination. They were concrete, documented, verifiable facts. At 12:30 a.m., I decided I couldn't continue to torment myself with doubts. I went up to my study on the second floor and turned on the desk lamp. For the next 4 hours, I dedicated myself to a task I never thought I would have to perform, meticulously organizing every document, every receipt, every proof of what I had invested in Samantha's happiness. I opened the bottom left drawer of my desk, where I kept all the paperwork related to the wedding. I had been extremely organized from the beginning, saving every invoice, every contract, every payment made. Eleanor always affectionately teased me about my obsession with paperwork, but now that habit would become my salvation. I spread everything out over the wide oak surface. 278 documents, perfectly classified by date and vendor. Grand Renaissance Manor, $38,000 for the rental of the ballroom and basic decor. The Golden Spoon Catering, $30,000 for the banquet for 150 guests. Secret Garden Florist, $13,000 for the complete floral decor. The Melodies Band, $9,000 for the live musical band. Each figure represented hours of work, years of savings, decades of sacrifice. I recalled the extra hours I had worked during the last 2 years, turning down vacations and free weekends to generate the additional income that would allow Samantha to have her dream wedding. At 4:15 a.m., I finished cataloging everything. The exact total was $90,247, not counting the Acura sedan worth $48,000 that I had bought as a wedding gift and which was registered in my name until after the ceremony. As I organized the papers into clearly labeled folders, a strange calm came over me. It was as if each document were a piece of armor, protecting me against David's accusations and manipulations. I had irrefutable proof of my generosity, my fatherly love, my total investment in Samantha's happiness. At 6 a.m., I called Teresa. My sister answered on the third ring with a sleepy voice, but was immediately alert when she heard my tone. "Ethan, what happened? Are you okay?" "Teresa, I need to tell you something. Samantha sent me a message last night." I read her both of Samantha's messages verbatim. In the end, Teresa remained silent for almost a full minute. "My God," she finally murmured, "that man really has her completely manipulated. Do you think I'm wrong? That I really am a possessive and jealous father, as Samantha says? Ethan, I've known you for 65 years. You're many things, stubborn, a perfectionist, sometimes too protective, but you have never been pathologically possessive. What that David is telling Samantha is pure psychological manipulation." Her words were like balm for my wounded soul. "What do I do, Teresa? My own daughter hates me." "She doesn't hate you. She's confused, scared, and completely under the influence of a master manipulator. But you have to stand firm in your principles. Does that mean you might lose her in the short term? Perhaps, but if you give in now, if you allow her to marry that man without consequences, you'll lose her forever in a much more devastating way." After hanging up with Teresa, I brewed coffee and sat in front of the kitchen window to watch the sunrise. It was Tuesday, March 13th, and I had made a decision that would change everything. Samantha had chosen. Now it was my turn to choose too. Throughout the morning, I reflected on the words I had heard at Eleanor's funeral, spoken by Pastor Johnson. True love sometimes requires painful but necessary decisions for the good of the beloved person. At the time, I had thought he was referring to the pain of letting Eleanor go. Now, I understood it also applied to the pain of setting boundaries with adult children, even when those boundaries might temporarily push them away. At 2:30 p.m., I picked up my phone and dialed the number of Richard O'Connell, my trusted attorney for 15 years. I needed legal advice before taking the next step. Richard, I need to see you urgently. It's about Samantha and her wedding. Something serious has happened. Something just happened. Do you have time this afternoon? Always for you. Come to the office at 5:00. As I prepared to leave for Richard's office, I took one last look at the 278 perfectly organized documents on my desk. Each paper represented love, sacrifice, hope, but they also represented power. Samantha and David had underestimated something fundamental. I completely controlled all financial aspects of that wedding. Every contract was in my name. Every payment came from my accounts. Every vendor had my details as the responsible party. If my daughter preferred to lose her father than lose her future husband, then she would have the opportunity to prove how solid that love really was when there was no dad's money backing it up. The war that David had started with his manipulation was about to take a turn neither of them had anticipated, and I had all the necessary weapons to win it. Richard O'Connell Vauwahu's office occupied the third floor of an elegant building in the Suffolk Financial District. For 15 years, he had been my legal advisor on all sorts of matters: construction contracts, real estate investments, and sadly the paperwork after Eleanor's death. Now, I needed his expertise for something completely different. Ethan, you have an expression I haven't seen since Eleanor's funeral, Richard said, as he poured 2 cups of a green tea in his study, lined with law books. Tell me what happened. I narrated the entire situation with clinical detail: the discovery of David's debts, the confrontation with Samantha, the cruel messages from the night before. Richard listened, taking occasional notes in his black leather notebook. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. Show me all the contracts, he requested when I finished my story. I opened my briefcase and spread the most important documents across his mahogany desk. Richard examined them, one by one, with the meticulousness of a surgeon, adjusting his reading glasses as he read each clause. "This is very well structured," he murmured after 20 minutes. "All contracts are in your name as the principal contractor. The vendors have your bank details as the sole source of payment. Samantha and David are listed only as beneficiaries of the services without any contractual responsibility. Does that mean I can cancel everything legally?" "Absolutely, but there will be financial consequences." Richard opened a digital calculator and started working with the figures. "Let's see. The wedding is scheduled for April 20th. That's 5 weeks and 2 days away. Most contracts have tiered cancellation clauses." He detailed each penalty to me. The Grand Renaissance Manor would charge $3,200 for cancellation with less than 6 weeks' notice. The Golden Spoon Catering, being specialized, would demand $2,800 for ingredients already purchased and staff reservation. Secret Garden Florist would keep $1,200 for flowers already ordered from their specialty growers. In total, you'll be paying approximately $8,000 in penalties, Richard calculated. It's lost money, but considering you save the remaining $82,000, it's still a financially smart decision. It's not about the money, Richard. It's about principle. I understand perfectly, but I want you to understand all the legal implications before proceeding. He leaned back in his swivel chair. Once you cancel these contracts, there's no turning back. Samantha could attempt legal action against you. On what grounds? She could allege emotional distress, damages for breach of verbal promises, even damage to her social reputation. These are weak legal arguments, but they could complicate your life for months. I considered his words carefully. And the Acura sedan? That's simpler. The vehicle is registered in your name, financed with your personal credit, and has not yet been legally transferred to Samantha. You can recover it without legal issues. What about the joint bank accounts I opened with Samantha for wedding expenses? Richard reviewed the bank documents I had brought. These accounts are structured as deposit accounts with 2 account holders, but you are the sole contributor of funds. You can close them immediately and recover the remaining balance, which, as I see here, is about $16,000. And if David has already used some of those funds for his bets, then you will have a legal basis to sue him for misappropriation. The bank movements are documented, and any unauthorized use for purposes other than wedding expenses constitutes a crime. Richard stood up and walked toward the window overlooking Wall Street. Ethan, as your attorney, I must ask you, are you absolutely sure you want to proceed? Once you take this path, your relationship with Samantha will change forever. It already changed last night when she chose a manipulative gambler over her own father. Understand that Samantha may react in unpredictable ways. The psychological manipulation you describe is very real and very powerful. David will likely convince her that you are the villain in this story. I'd rather be the villain who saves my daughter than the complacent father who watches her destroy herself. Richard nodded slowly. Very well. Then let's proceed methodically. I suggest you make the cancellations in a specific order to minimize legal problems. Over the next hour, we designed a detailed strategy. First, we would cancel the largest and most expensive services, the ballroom and catering. Then the secondary services, flowers, music, photography. Finally, we would address the financial aspects, closing the bank accounts, recovering the Acura sedan, and reviewing any other pending financial commitments. Do I need to inform Samantha before proceeding? I asked. Legally, no. Morally, that's your decision, but I advise you to document the entire process. Save copies of every cancellation, every email, every phone conversation. If this ends up in court, you'll need proof that you acted responsibly and justifiably. Before leaving, Richard handed me a folder with pre-printed forms for the cancellations and a checklist to ensure I didn't forget any details. One last thing, Ethan, he said, as he shook my hand at the door. Consider the possibility that Samantha will eventually recognize that you were right. When that happens, and I'm sure it will, make sure you're prepared to forgive. And if it never happens, then at least you'll know that you did everything possible to protect her, even from herself. I returned home at 7:30 p.m. with a mental clarity I hadn't felt in days. In my study, I arranged all the materials Richard had provided alongside my 278 organized documents. It was like preparing a military campaign with maps, strategies, and clearly defined resources. I ate dinner alone that night, a lentil soup Eleanor had taught me to cook after her death. As I ate, I mentally reviewed every step of the plan. Tomorrow, Wednesday, I would begin the cancellations. By Friday, everything would be finished. The phone rang at 9:45 p.m. It was Teresa. How did it go with Richard? Perfectly. Everything is legally locked down. I can cancel without major problems. And emotionally, how are you? I paused before answering, strangely calm. For the first time since I discovered the gambling, I feel like I'm in control of the situation. I'm glad to hear you sound like that. Have you heard anything else from Samantha? Nothing. And I think it's better that way. When I finish canceling everything, then we'll talk. Ethan, I want you to know that I completely support your decision. I know it must be the hardest thing you've ever done. No, Teresa. The hardest thing was burying Eleanor. This is painful, but necessary. After hanging up, I sat in my favorite armchair with a glass of the American bourbon, the same one Eleanor and I shared on special occasions. I looked at the family photos arranged on the mantelpiece. Samantha at age 5 on her first day of school. Samantha at 16 at her graduation. Samantha at 28, the day she introduced me to David. In that last photo, David smiled at the camera, with an expression that, in retrospect, now seemed calculated. His arm possessively encircled Samantha's shoulders, and she looked at him with blind adoration. There had been signs from the beginning, but fatherly love had blinded me to them. Tomorrow, I would begin to correct that mistake, no matter how painful the consequences. At 11:30 p.m., I turned off the lights and went up to my bedroom. Before going to bed, I checked my phone one last time. There were no new messages from Samantha. I slept deeply for the first time in a week. Wednesday, March 14th, dawned with a clear sky over New York. I got up at 6:30 a.m., an hour earlier than usual, with the determination of a general about to fight the decisive battle of his life. I had slept better than I had in weeks, as if my subconscious had found peace in the certainty that I was finally going to act. After showering and dressing in my most formal navy blue suit, I prepared a full breakfast, whole wheat toast with avocado, strong coffee, and orange juice. I needed energy for what lay ahead. As I ate breakfast, I reviewed Richard's checklist one more time, making sure I had all the phone numbers, contract references, and necessary documents. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, I settled into my study with all the materials organized on the desk. The first call would be the most impactful. The Grand Renaissance Manor. Good morning, this is Elaine Harrison. How can I help you? Good morning, Elaine. This is Ethan Miller. I have your ballroom contracted for April the 20th under reference number GR24084 and 7. Mr. Miller, of course, your daughter Samantha's wedding. Everything is progressing perfectly. We confirmed the tasting menu yesterday. Elaine, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I need to completely cancel the event. The silence on the other end of the line was so profound that I thought the connection had been cut. Mr. Miller, she finally said, cancel? That's right. Due to urgent family matters, we need to cancel the celebration. But sir, there are only 5 weeks left. We have placed special orders, contracted additional staff, and reserved exclusive vendors. I perfectly understand the implications, Elaine. I am willing to assume the corresponding contractual penalties. Elaine transferred me to the sales director, Alex Rodriguez, who tried for 20 minutes to convince me to postpone instead of cancel. I politely but firmly explained that the cancellation was final and irrevocable. Mr. Miller, the penalty will be $3,200 plus the local sales tax. That's $3,500 that you will completely lose. Understood? Understood. When can I come in to sign the cancellation? This afternoon, if you wish. We need to formalize everything as soon as possible to minimize our own losses. The second call was to the Golden Spoon Catering. The owner-chef, Frank Castle, was initially incredulous and then visibly annoyed. Mr. Miller, we've been preparing special ingredients for your banquet for 2 weeks. The seafood is reserved from Maine. We have contracted 5 extra cooks. Frank, I deeply regret the inconvenience. I will compensate all unrecoverable costs according to our contract. That's a $2,800 penalty plus the cost of ingredients already purchased that we cannot resell. In total, $4,500. Each cancellation felt like receiving a stab, not because of the money, but because of the reality of what I was destroying. Every vendor represented months of careful planning, illusions shared with Samantha, dreams of seeing her radiant on the most important day of her life. The third call was to a secret garden florist. The florist, Clara Lopez, almost burst into tears when I communicated the cancellation. Mr. Miller, the white peonies your daughter ordered are coming directly from Oregon. The garden roses are being specially cultivated to create the exact shade she wanted. Clara, keep the flowers you can use for other events. Charge the rest to my account. That's a $1,200 penalty, but the special flowers amount to another $900. I'm so sorry, but I can't absorb those losses. By 12:30 p.m., I had completed the 6 main calls. Each conversation had been more difficult than the last, not only because of the financial penalties, but because of the genuine dismay of people who had invested time and effort in making what they believed was the dream of a loving couple come true. The total penalties amounted to $8,800, slightly higher than Richard's estimate, but within expectations. During the lunch break, I received 3 missed calls from Samantha. I didn't answer them. I needed to complete the entire process before facing her inevitable explosion of fury. At 3 p.m., I headed to the Acura dealership on Long Island. The silver Acura sedan I had bought for Samantha was in the workshop being prepared with the final details she had requested: custom upholstery and a premium sound system. Mr. Miller, what a surprise to see you here, greeted James Taylor, the salesman who had managed the purchase. Are you here to supervise the final adjustments for your daughter's gift? Actually, I'm here to recover the vehicle. James's expression instantly changed. Recover it? I don't understand. I need you to cancel all pending work and return the car to me in its original state. You can keep the customizations already done. But sir, we invested $3,200 in the modifications your daughter requested. Bill me for that amount. I just want to recover the vehicle today. James apologized and went to consult with his supervisor. He returned 15 minutes later with reverse transfer documents. We will need you to sign here to nullify the planned transfer to Ms. Samantha Miller. As I signed, I felt a deep melancholy. I had imagined Samantha's expression so many times when I handed her the keys on her wedding day. Now those keys were returning to my keychain, cold and heavy as the metal they were made of. At 5 p.m., I was at the Pete Chase Bank branch on Park Avenue, where I had opened the joint accounts with Samantha to manage the wedding expenses. The branch manager, Marie Santos, received me in her private office. Mr. Miller, how can I help you today? I need to close accounts R3156789 and 43156790. They are the joint accounts I opened with my daughter for her wedding expenses. Marie checked her computer with an expression of surprise. I see here that the accounts have a joint balance of $15,700. Is there a problem? The wedding has been cancelled. I need to recover the funds. I understand. Since you are the principal account holder and sole contributor, you can close the accounts without issue. Would you like to transfer the balance to your personal account? Please. While Marie processed the transfers, she showed me the history of movements for the last few weeks. Most were transfers from me, regular deposits to cover anticipated expenses, but 3 withdrawals caught my attention. $500 on February 28th, $750 on March 5th, and $1,200 on March 10th. Can you tell me who authorized these withdrawals? According to the record, they were made by Ms. Samantha Miller with her debit card, all at ATMs in different locations. A chill ran down my spine. The dates coincided exactly with the period when David had intensified his bets, according to the statements I had reviewed. Samantha had been withdrawing money from the wedding accounts to give to David, likely without knowing what he was truly using it for. At 6:45 p.m., I returned home with all the paperwork completed. On my desk, I arranged the cancellation documents chronologically. Grand Renaissance Manor, the Golden Spoon Catering, Secret Garden Florist. The Melodies Band. Artistic Photography Studio, and finally, the Sarts Acura return. The total cost of the cancellations had been $9,050 in penalties and unrecoverable costs, a considerable figure but insignificant compared to the $81,000 I had saved. More importantly, I had recovered $15,000 from the joint accounts. However, knowing that Samantha had been unknowingly financing David's bets added an extra layer of bitterness. At 7:30 p.m., my phone began to ring insistently. It was Samantha. This time, I decided to answer. "Dad, what have you done?" Her voice was a desperate cry that pierced my heart. "Hello, Samantha. How are you? Don't give me your pleasantries. Elaine from the Grand Renaissance Manor called me an hour ago. She said you cancelled everything." "That's right. I gave you an ultimatum until March 20th. 2 days have passed, and I haven't received any confirmation that David is seeking professional help." "Are you crazy? How could you do this?" "Very easily. All the contracts were in my name. All payments came from my accounts. It was my money financing your wedding. It was our money. We had agreed that you would pay for the wedding. And I would have done so gladly if your future husband weren't a gambler who is using your bank accounts to fund his bets." There was a deadly silence on the other end of the line. "Samantha, between February 28th and March 10th, you withdrew $2,450 from the wedding accounts. Do you know what David used that money for?" That's not true. I have the bank statements right here. Do you want me to read you the exact dates and amounts?" The sound of Samantha crying tore my soul apart, but I knew I couldn't back down. "Dad, please, the wedding is in 5 weeks. We can't cancel everything now." "It's already cancelled, Samantha. Everything. The ballroom, the catering, the flowers, the music, the photography, and I also recovered the Acura sedan." "You can't do this to me." "I already did. Now you and David will have to prove how real your love is when there's no Dad's money backing it up." I hung up the phone with a broken heart, but a clear conscience. The war had officially begun. Thursday, March 17th, started with a deceptive calm. I had slept surprisingly well after the devastating call with Samantha, as if my body had found relief in the completion of a painful but necessary process. I got up early, brewed my usual coffee, and checked the newspaper while having breakfast, trying to maintain a normal routine amidst the emotional chaos I had unleashed. At 10:15 a.m., my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting visitors, and for a moment I thought it might be the mail carrier with a package. But when I opened the door, I found Samantha standing on the threshold, her eyes swollen from crying and an expression of desperation I hadn't seen since the day Eleanor was diagnosed with cancer. "Dad, we need to talk," she murmured hoarsely. Behind her, leaning against a waiting cab with the engine running, was David. His presence surprised me because I expected Samantha to come alone, as she usually did when she needed emotional support from her father. "Come in," I said, stepping aside to let her pass. "David can wait in the taxi." "No, Dad. David is coming with me. He's my fiancé, and he has the right to be present in this conversation." I watched David as he approached the door. His expression was a calculated mix of feigned humility and contained defiance. He wore a wrinkled white shirt and dress pants that looked like they'd been worn all night. "Good morning, Mr. Miller," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm very sorry we've reached this situation." I didn't return his greeting. I simply stepped aside and let them in. In the living room, Samantha sat on the sofa, where she used to curl up as a child when she had nightmares. David remained standing behind her, his hands resting on her shoulders in a gesture that seemed more possessive than protective. "Dad, I can't believe you actually cancelled everything," Samantha began. Elaine So, from the Grand Renaissance Manor, explained to me that you even paid the penalties, $9,050, completely lost. It's a small price compared to what you would have lost if I had allowed this charade to continue. David visibly tensed at my words. "Mr. Miller, I think you are completely misinterpreting the situation." "Misinterpreting? I have bank documents showing you've spent over $40,000 at betting houses in the last 6 months. I have records of calls from collection agencies looking for you over unpaid debts. What exactly am I misinterpreting?" Samantha leaned forward, clinging to a last shred of hope. David explained all that to me. "Dad, they're not traditional bets, they're foreign exchange trading, cryptocurrency investments." Samantha FanDuel is not a cryptocurrency platform. DraftKings is not a foreign exchange house. They are online casinos, plain and simple. David changed his strategy, adopting a more conciliatory tone. "Mr. Miller, I admit, I've made some financial mistakes, but I love Samantha deeply, and I'm willing to seek help if that's what's needed to regain your trust." "Now, after I've cancelled the wedding, you're willing to seek help? Sometimes we need a shock to realize the seriousness of our problems," he replied with a humility that sounded rehearsed. Samantha immediately brightened. "See, Dad? David is willing to change. We can postpone the wedding for a few months. He'll seek treatment, and everything will return to normal." I looked her directly in the eyes. "Samantha, do you know how much money you withdrew from the wedding accounts between February and March?" Her expression changed instantly. "What does that have to do with this?" $2,450 in 3 separate withdrawals. What did you use that money for?" Samantha looked nervously at David, who squeezed her shoulders in what I suppose was meant to be a reassuring gesture. "They were our personal expenses," Samantha murmured. "Personal expenses or money you gave David for his bets." "Stop it!" David exploded, finally losing his composure. "I will not allow you to keep interrogating Samantha as if she were a criminal." "No, David, Samantha isn't the criminal here. You're the one who has been psychologically manipulating her, financially using her, and systematically lying about your addictions. You don't know anything about our relationship. I know you've made her believe her father is the enemy. I know you've isolated her from her family. I know you've turned her into your personal funding source." Samantha stood up abruptly. "Stop it, both of you, stop it!" She placed herself between David and me, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Dad, I beg you. We'll get married at the courthouse if we have to, but don't destroy our relationship over money. It's not about money, Samantha. It's about David using you. He loves me." "Really? Then ask him about the blonde woman who was seen with him at the mall last month." The silence that followed was deafening. Samantha slowly turned toward David, whose face had completely lost color. "What is he talking about?" Samantha whispered. David stammered, "No, I don't know what he's talking about. It must be a mix-up." Teresa saw him clearly, David, with a young blonde woman behaving very intimately. Samantha staggered as if she had received a physical blow. "David, is it true?" "Samantha, your father is making things up to separate us." "I'm not making anything up. I took out my phone and dialed Teresa's number. Ask her yourself." But Samantha didn't need that confirmation. Something in David's expression, in his inability to flatly deny it, told her everything she needed to know. "Oh my God," she murmured, bringing her hands to her mouth. It was all a lie. All of it. David tried to approach her. "Samantha, let me explain." "Don't touch me," she screamed, pulling away from him as if he were poisonous. She turned to me with an expression of pain so profound that it reminded me of the day we told her her mother wouldn't recover. "Dad, I didn't know. He told me that you—" "I know, honey, I know." David saw that the situation was completely slipping out of his hands. His mask of humility crumbled, revealing the true nature he had been hiding. "Samantha, if you really love me, we'll leave here right now. Your father is never going to accept our relationship, no matter what I do." Samantha looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. "That's your response? After he just accused you of cheating on me and using my money to gamble? Your father is manipulating the situation. My father paid $90,000 for our wedding. My father bought me an Acura sedan. How is that manipulation? Because he uses his money to control you, and you used my money to gamble." The argument escalated quickly. David began to show the aggressive temper he had been concealing, raising his voice and making threatening gestures. Samantha instinctively backed away, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes when she looked at the man she had planned to marry. "If you don't come with me now, Samantha, this is over," David roared. "Then it's over," Samantha replied with a surprisingly firm voice. David looked at her with disbelief. "Seriously? After everything we've been through together? After everything you've lied to me?" "Yes." David headed for the door, but before leaving, he turned to me with an expression of pure hatred. "This doesn't end here, old man. Samantha will come back to me when she realizes how lonely she's going to be without me. If Samantha comes back to you after knowing the whole truth, that will be her adult decision. But it won't be with my money backing you up." David slammed the door shut, making the window panes rattle. Samantha collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing in a way I hadn't seen since she was a little girl. I sat next to her, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't pull away when I hugged her. "Dad, I'm so sorry. You were right about everything. I'm an idiot." "You're not an idiot, Samantha. You were manipulated by an expert." "But I should have noticed. The signs were there." Love blinds us sometimes, but the important thing is that now you can see clearly. We remained embraced for a long time, while Samantha cried, not only for David, but for the loss of all her dreams about the future they had built together. "What am I going to do now, Dad?" she finally asked. "You're going to rebuild step by step, and I'm going to help you. After all the horrible things I said to you, Samantha, you're my daughter. A father's love isn't cancelled like a wedding contract. But even as I comforted her, a part of me knew that this reconciliation was only the beginning. David wouldn't give up so easily, and the coming weeks would test both Samantha's resolve and my own determination to protect her. The days following the March 17th confrontation felt like living in the eye of a hurricane. Samantha stayed at my house that night, sleeping in her old room for the first time in 2 years. I found her at 3 a.m. sitting in the kitchen, staring blankly at a cup of chamomile tea that had gone completely cold. "I can't sleep," she confessed when I sat across from her. "Every time I close my eyes, I remember all the lies he told me, all the times I defended his strange behaviors. The brain needs time to process betrayal," I told her, pouring myself some herbal tea as well. "When I lost your mother, I couldn't sleep either. The mind keeps searching for explanations, trying to make sense of what makes no sense. But Mum didn't betray you. David betrayed me, and I was stupid enough to help him do it." During that late-night conversation, Samantha began to reveal details that had remained hidden for months. She told me about the times David would disappear for hours without explanation, about the sudden mood swings when he lost money, about the elaborate excuses to borrow small amounts of money he never repaid. "Last week, he asked me for $500 because his company supposedly delayed his paycheck," she explained, her voice cracking. "I gave it to him without hesitation because I completely trusted him." On Friday, March 18th, the true social consequences of the cancellation began. The phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from family members, friends, and acquaintances who had received fragmented news about what happened. My sister-in-law, Patty, Eleanor's sister, was the first to show up at the house around noon, with an expression of genuine concern mixed with morbid curiosity. "Ethan, is it true you cancelled Samantha's wedding?" she asked without preamble as she entered the living room. "It's true, Patty. I discovered David has serious gambling problems and was manipulating Samantha. But honey, there are only 5 weeks left. Couldn't you have waited until after the wedding to resolve those problems?" That attitude, sadly, would be typical of many people in the following days. For some family and friends, social reputation and avoiding the shame of a cancelled wedding were more important than protecting Samantha from a destructive marriage. Samantha, who had been listening to the conversation from the kitchen, appeared in the living room with red-rimmed eyes but a firm voice. "Aunt Patty, my father saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. David isn't just a gambler. He was also cheating on me." Patty's expression immediately changed. Over the next hour, Samantha told her the whole story, and I watched my sister-in-law go from initial disbelief to complete support. But not all reactions were so sympathetic. On Saturday, March 19th, Samantha received a call from her close friend, Sarah, who had been chosen as the maid of honor. "Samantha, I just got your message about the cancellation. Are you absolutely sure about what you're doing?" Sarah asked with a tone of reproach. "I already bought my maid of honor dress, paid for the hotel for the wedding weekend, and took days off work. Sarah, David was cheating on me and using my money to gamble." "But Samantha, all men have flaws. You don't cancel a wedding over that. You could have worked on your problems after getting married." That conversation ended badly, with Sarah accusing Samantha of being dramatic and immature and abruptly hanging up. It was the first of several friendships Samantha would lose in the following days. On Sunday, during morning mass at St. Patrick's, our lifelong parish, I directly experienced the weight of social pressure. Several people I had known for decades approached me with expressions of false compassion. "Ethan, I heard about Samantha," murmured Mrs. Peterson, a woman who had been a close friend of Eleanor's. "What a shame you couldn't resolve your differences in another way." They weren't differences, Mrs. Peterson. Samantha's fiancé had serious problems with gambling addiction. Yes, but honey, in my day, families resolved these problems internally. Canceling a wedding is so public. That phrase deeply offended me. Would you prefer Samantha to marry a gambler just to avoid gossip? Of course not. But maybe you could have postponed instead of cancelled. I left the church that Sunday with the clear understanding that we would face months of similar comments from people who prioritized appearances over Samantha's real well-being. Monday, March 21st, brought the most painful financial consequences for Samantha personally. She received calls from 3 vendors with whom she had made separate contracts, using her own savings for items I hadn't covered. The first call was from Bridal Elegance, the boutique where she had bought her wedding dress. Ms. Evans, the owner, explained that the dress had been specifically designed for her and couldn't be sold to another client. "Samantha, the dress cost $3,000, and it's completely customized to your measurements and preferences. I can't refund the money because it's impossible to resell." The second loss was the honeymoon package to Hawaii that Samantha had booked as a surprise for David. Island Tours travel agency informed her that since it was less than 6 weeks before the trip, they could only reimburse 30% of the total cost. "Miss Miller, the package cost $5,000. We can refund you $1,500, but the remaining $3,500 is lost due to the hotels and airlines cancellation policies." The third loss was the $1,300 she had paid for the artisanal paper wedding invitations, already printed with their names and the April 20th date. In total, Samantha lost $13,800 of her own savings, money she had been putting aside for 3 years, working as an administrative assistant at an insurance company. "Dad, these were all my savings," she confessed that night as we reviewed the cancellation documents together. "I worked extra hours for 2 years to pay for these additional expenses without asking you for more money." Seeing the tears in her eyes as she calculated her financial losses broke my heart. Samantha had demonstrated responsibility and independence by handling part of the expenses with her own resources, and now she lost everything because of David's betrayal. "Samantha, I'll compensate you for those losses," I offered immediately. "No, Dad. They were my decisions. I chose to trust David. I chose to make those additional expenses. I chose to defend him when you warned me. But you were manipulated. I was an adult, making adult decisions. The consequences are also mine." That response filled me with pride for my daughter. Despite the pain and betrayal, she was demonstrating a maturity and integrity that David had never possessed. If you're watching this video, please also like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. Tuesday, March 22nd, brought the news that definitively confirmed we had made the right decision. Teresa called around 8 p.m. with information she had obtained through a friend who worked at the Charlotte local casino. "Ethan, you need to know this. My friend Juan Carmen discreetly checked David's records at the casino. He's lost an additional $25,000 in the last 3 weeks alone. $25,000 more. Yes, and the worst part is that he had apparently promised to settle those debts with the wedding gift money after April 20th. Samantha, who had overheard the conversation, turned pale. That means he planned to use the wedding gift money to pay off his gambling debts? Exactly. And according to Carmen, when he found out the wedding was cancelled, David had a nervous breakdown at the casino. Security had to escort him out because he was yelling about that manipulative old man who ruined his plans. That night, Samantha and I stayed up very late talking about everything we had discovered. Every new revelation confirmed that David had not only been a lying fiancé, but a financial predator who had seen a golden opportunity in our family to solve his economic problems. "Dad, do you think he ever truly loved me?" Samantha asked me before going to sleep. "I think David loved the idea of having access to a comfortable life with no responsibilities. But true love, the kind of love that requires personal sacrifice and real commitment? No, Samantha, I don't think he's capable of that kind of love. So, I lost 2 years of my life with someone who only saw me as a source of money. You didn't lose anything, honey. You learned something invaluable about your own strength and about the importance of trusting your gut when something doesn't feel right." As Samantha went up to her room, I stayed in the living room reflecting on the past few weeks. We had paid a high price to discover the truth, $22,950 in total between my cancellations and Samantha's losses, plus the emotional and social cost. But compared to what would have happened if Samantha had married David, it was a small investment in her future and her dignity. Tomorrow would be Wednesday, March the 23rd, and I knew there were still battles to be fought. David wouldn't surrender easily, and the coming weeks would bring challenges I couldn't yet imagine. Wednesday, March 23rd, dawned gray and rainy, as if New York itself reflected the emotional state we had been through during the last week. Samantha had returned to her apartment the day before, needing space to process everything that had happened, but we maintained constant phone contact. For the first time in months, our conversations were honest, without the artificial tension David had sown between us. I was in my office reviewing some construction projects when Teresa arrived unannounced at 11:30 a.m. Her expression was serious, and she carried a manila folder she clutched firmly against her chest. "Ethan, we need to talk urgently," she said as she closed the door behind her. "I've been investigating David further, and what I discovered is worse than we imagined." "What did you find?" Teresa sat across from my desk and opened the folder, revealing photographs, printed documents, and pages of handwritten notes in her meticulous script. "Remember I told you about seeing him with a blonde woman at the mall? Well, I decided to contact my friend, Monica, who works in human resources at a major retail company. I asked her to discreetly check if David really worked where he claimed." My stomach clenched. And what did she find? David Foster has never worked at MKT Solutions in New York. The company exists, but when Monica called asking about him, they told her he had never been an employee. I felt as if I had been hit with a sledgehammer. So, where did he get the money he spent regularly? That's the most disturbing part. Teresa took several bank documents out of the folder. Through Monica, I managed to contact Bethany, a woman who worked at a Bank of America until last year. It turns out David was dating her younger sister, Patricia, for 8 months in 2022. And what happened with that relationship? Teresa showed me printed photographs from social media. David with a young brunette, about 25, smiling in expensive restaurants and beach vacations. According to Bethany, David convinced Patricia that he was a successful entrepreneur in the technology sector. The girl, who was a bank teller, started regularly lending him money for temporary investments that always had some bureaucratic problem that prevented him from accessing his main funds. The same pattern he used with Samantha. Exactly. But with Patricia, he was more aggressive. In 6 months, he took $20,000 from her personal savings. When the family found out and confronted him, David disappeared overnight, leaving only a note saying he had had to travel urgently to San Francisco for business. I checked the dates on the documents. That means he met Samantha barely 2 months after scamming Patricia? Correct. And there's more. Teresa pulled out another set of documents. Monica has a cousin who works at a real estate agency in Wayne, Queens. I asked her to verify the address David had given as his residence. Does the address exist? It exists, but David has never lived there. It's a commercial office building. According to the doorman, David showed up a year ago asking to use the address to receive correspondence in exchange for $50 a month. The magnitude of the deceit left me speechless. David had not only lied about his job and his finances, but he had constructed a completely false identity to gain Samantha's trust. Teresa, how did you manage to get all this information in such a short time? When I saw how that man had manipulated Samantha, I decided to use all my contacts to investigate him thoroughly. I called all the friends I have in banks, companies, real estate. New York is a big city, but professional circles are small. She then showed me the most unsettling piece of evidence. Photographs taken from a cell phone that showed David entering and exiting an apartment in the Lower East Side. Who took these photos? Carmen, my friend from the casino. I asked her to discreetly follow him after the incident last Tuesday. It turns out David didn't become homeless when he broke up with Samantha. He's been living with a woman named Lucy Martin, 29, who works as a nurse at St. Vincent's Hospital. Another victim. That seems to be the case. According to the neighbors Carmen managed to talk to, David has been living there for 3 months, telling Lucy he's gradually separating from his ex-girlfriend because the relationship had become toxic. The revelation chilled me. While Samantha was planning her wedding and I was investing $90,000 in her happiness, David was building a parallel relationship with another woman, likely using the same lies and manipulations he had employed with my daughter. Does Samantha know about Lucy? Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first to decide how and when to tell her. At that moment, I understood that Samantha hadn't lost an unfaithful boyfriend. She had escaped a professional predator who specialized in exploiting hard-working women and families with financial resources. Teresa, I need you to get me all the information possible about Lucy Martin. If David is manipulating her as he manipulated Samantha, she has the right to know the truth. I already thought of that. Carmen is going to try to make indirect contact with her. Apparently, Lucy has already loaned David money for family medical emergencies. We spent the next 2 hours reviewing all the evidence Teresa had collected. It was like putting together a macabre jigsaw puzzle. Each piece revealed a new dimension of David's sociopathy. There were at least 4 different phone numbers registered in his name at different banks and companies. He had used 3 different addresses in official documents over the last 2 years. And according to the tax records Monica had managed to check, David hadn't filed a tax return in the last 3 years. He's a financial ghost, I murmured, as I organized the documents. He lives completely outside the legal system. And the most worrying thing is that he's very good at what he does. If you hadn't been so meticulous with your financial records, if you hadn't had the strength to confront Samantha when you discovered the gambling, David would have consummated his biggest scam to date. At 3 p.m., I decided to call Samantha and ask her to come home. I couldn't tell her these revelations over the phone. I needed to be present to support her when she processed the true magnitude of the betrayal she had suffered. "Dad, did something happen?" she asked when she heard the serious tone of my voice. "Samantha, I need you to come home. Teresa has discovered some very important information about David that you need to know." "More information?" "Dad, I know enough already. I know he lied to me, that he gambled, that he probably cheated on me. Honey, this is different. Please come." Samantha arrived at 4:30 p.m., accompanied by an expression of emotional exhaustion that broke my heart. Over the past few days, she had aged years, losing the radiant youth that had characterized her all her life. Teresa presented the information to her gradually, starting with the lies about the job and address, continuing with Patricia's story, and finally revealing the existence of Lucy Martin. I watched Samantha's face as she processed each revelation. First disbelief, then pain, then fury, and finally a strange calm that worried me more than any other reaction. "So, he never loved me," she said in a flat voice when Teresa finished. "Not even a little bit. I was just another job for him." "Samantha, no. No, Dad. It's okay. I needed to hear this." She stood up and walked toward the window, looking out at the garden where Eleanor used to work. "For 2 years, I shared my bed, my money, my dreams with a man who was probably laughing at me every night. Don't torture yourself with those thoughts. You know what hurts the most?" She turned back to us, tears in her eyes, but her voice firm. "I told him everything about Mom, about how she died, about my fears and my hopes. I opened my soul completely to him, and he used it all as information to manipulate me better." Teresa approached her and hugged her. "Samantha, you are a good woman who trusted the wrong person. That doesn't make you stupid, it makes you human." "What do we do with the information about Lucy?" Samantha asked after several minutes of silence. "That decision is yours," I replied. "We can contact her to warn her, or we can keep the information private." Samantha reflected for a long time. "I want to talk to her. If David is scamming her as he scammed me, she has the right to know. No one should go through what I went through." That response filled me with pride for my daughter. Despite her own pain, she was thinking about protecting another woman from suffering the same deception. "Are you sure? It could be a very difficult conversation." "Dad, for 2 years, David made me believe that I was special, that I was the woman of his life. If Lucy is hearing the same lies, she deserves to know the truth before it's too late." That night, while Teresa organized the contact with Lucy through Carmen, I reflected on Samantha's transformation during the last few weeks. The naive woman who had blindly defended David had evolved into someone stronger, wiser, more aware of her own worth. David had tried to destroy my daughter, but he had inadvertently forged in her a strength she would never have developed otherwise. However, I knew that the final chapter of this story was yet to come, and I had a feeling that David wouldn't disappear silently as he had done with Patricia. This time, he had lost too much potential money, and men like him don't easily accept defeat. The war was far from over. Friday, March 25th, began with an unexpected call that would definitively change the course of events. It was 8:45 a.m. when my phone rang with an unknown number. When I answered, I heard a shaky, desperate female voice. "Mr. Miller, this is what, Lucy Martin. I think..." I think we need to talk about David. My heart immediately raced. Teresa had managed to make indirect contact with her through Carmen, but I hadn't expected Lucy to take the initiative to call me directly. Good morning, Lucy. What happened? Last night, David came home completely enraged, shouting about you and Samantha. He broke several objects in my apartment and said terrible things about your family. Her voice broke. Then he disappeared, taking my laptop and the jewelry I inherited from my grandmother. Are you hurt? Do you need medical help? Physically, I'm fine, but Mr. Miller, I found things. After he left, I checked his belongings and found documents, photos, even love letters addressed to other women. Lucy, can you come to my office this morning? My daughter Samantha wants to meet you, and I think together you can help each other understand what David has really been doing. Samantha wants to see me? I thought she would hate me. Samantha is an extraordinary woman who has been through exactly the same thing as you. Believe me, the last thing she feels for you is hatred. At 11 a.m., Lucy Martin walked into my office accompanied by Samantha, who had insisted on picking her up personally at the subway station. Lucy was a small woman of 29, with her brown hair pulled back and deep circles under her eyes that betrayed a sleepless night. She carried a plastic bag with documents that David had left in her apartment. Mr. Miller, first of all, I want to apologize, Lucy began in a barely audible voice. David told me that you were a controlling, manipulative father who couldn't accept Samantha being happy with another man. And what do you think now? Now I think David is a very intelligent monster who knows exactly what lies to tell to make women do what he wants. Samantha sat next to Lucy and gently took her hand. How long were you with him? 4 months officially, but now I realize he was probably planning to approach me for much longer. Lucy opened her bag and began taking out documents. I work at St. Vincent's Hospital, and David frequently showed up at the hospital cafeteria. He said he was visiting a sick uncle, but now I think he was studying me. How did your relationship start? One day he invited me for coffee and told me a very sad story about how his fiancée had left him due to family pressure. He said her parents wouldn't accept him because he didn't come from a wealthy family and that he was going through a terrible depression. Samantha and I exchanged glances. It was the distorted version of our situation, turned into a tool of emotional manipulation. Did he ask you for money from the beginning? He was very subtle. First, he would pay for expensive dinners, buy me small gifts, make me feel special. Then the family emergencies started. His mother needed an urgent operation. His brother had had an accident. Problems with the company where he supposedly worked. Lucy pulled a notebook from her bag where she had meticulously recorded every loan she had made to David. In 4 months, I loaned him $8,600, she said, her voice breaking. All the money I had saved for 2 years to buy a car. Samantha spontaneously hugged her. Lucy, I lost $13,800 of my own savings, plus another $2,450 I withdrew from the wedding accounts to give him without my father finding out. Seriously? Did he constantly ask you for money too? Yes, but he was very smart. They were never huge amounts at once. $50 here, $200 there, $500 for an emergency. In the end, you add it all up, and you realize you've been funding his gambling addiction for months. Lucy then showed us the most disturbing piece of evidence she had found. A notebook where David kept a detailed record of his financial goals with different women. I found this hidden at the bottom of my closet, she said as she opened the notebook. There are lists with women's names, their jobs, their family situations, and next to them, an estimation of how much money he could get out of each one. My blood ran cold when I saw the page dedicated to Samantha. David had written, Samantha Miller, 32, administrative assistant, wealthy widower father, potential wedding, $90, $100K. Long-term goal. On the next page was Lucy's information. Lucy Martin, 29, nurse, no close family, estimated savings, $10K, emotionally vulnerable. This man is a psychopath, I murmured, as I reviewed other pages that contained information about at least 6 different women, including Patricia. There's more, Lucy said, her voice trembling. Last night, before he left, David told me that all of this was your fault, Mr. Miller, that you had ruined the best plan he'd ever had, and that he was going to make you regret it. Did he threaten you directly? Not me, but he did talk about you and Samantha. He said things like, that old man doesn't know who he's messed with, and I'm going to get back what's mine. Samantha visibly tensed. Do you think he could do something violent? I don't know, but I've never seen him so furious. He broke my television, threw all the dishes on the floor, and when I tried to calm him down, he yelled at me to shut up because stupid women like me had ruined everything. I immediately decided it was time to involve the authorities. I called the precinct and reported the threats, the theft of Lucy's belongings, and provided all the documentary evidence we had compiled about David's scams. Inspector Wash George Moreno arrived at my office at 3:30 p.m. and took detailed statements from both Samantha and Lucy. When he saw the notebook with the financial goals, his expression became very serious. Ladies, this is evidence of a systematic criminal pattern. David Foster is not simply a lying boyfriend. He's a professional con artist who specializes in romantic fraud. Can you arrest him? Samantha asked. With this evidence, yes, but first we have to find him. Do either of you know where he might be now? Lucy shook her head. He took everything he had in my apartment. I think he planned to disappear completely. But Inspector Moreno explained something we hadn't considered. Men like David rarely abandon a situation where they have invested so much time and effort without making one last attempt to recover what they've lost. In my experience, these professional scammers don't disappear silently when they lose a major opportunity. They become obsessed, they become unpredictable, and they often make mistakes that completely expose them. That prediction would prove prophetic. On Sunday, March 27th, Samantha received 15 missed calls from David between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. When she finally answered the phone, she was met with an unrecognizable David. His voice was raspy. He sounded under the influence of alcohol or drugs, and he alternated between desperate pleas and veiled threats. Samantha, my love, all of this has been a terrible misunderstanding, David began in a slurred voice. Your father set a trap for me. He manipulated the evidence to separate us. David, it's useless. I know the truth about Patricia, about Lucy, about everything. Those women mean nothing. You're the only one I care about. We can go to another country, start over. I don't want to see you ever again. Your father owes me $80,000, he suddenly shouted. He promised to pay for a wedding, and now he has to comply. If not, I'm going to sue you for damages. Samantha hung up, but David continued calling obsessively throughout the early morning. On Monday morning, we found David camping outside my office, dirty, disheveled, and clearly mentally disturbed. When I arrived at work at 9 a.m., he approached me, staggering, with bloodshot eyes. Ethan Miller, you ruined my life. I immediately called the police while keeping my distance from him. David continued shouting incoherent accusations about family conspiracies and stolen money until the officers arrived. When they tried to arrest him, David finally revealed his true nature. He resisted violently, insulted the police officers, and shouted that he was going to burn everything down if he didn't get his wedding money back. He was arrested for disturbing the peace, threats, and resisting arrest. In his pockets were found Lucy's stolen jewelry and a handwritten list with the addresses of my house, my office, and Samantha's apartment. On Tuesday, March 29th, Inspector Moreno informed us that David had partially confessed during the interrogation, admitting to scamming several women, but insisting that they all knew what they were getting into. "What's going to happen now?" Samantha asked. "With the evidence you provided, plus the testimony of Patricia Wood that we managed to contact, David will face charges of aggravated fraud, misappropriation, and threats. He will likely receive between 2 and 4 years in prison." That afternoon, Samantha and I sat in my garden, contemplating Eleanor's roses that were beginning to show the first buds of spring. "Dad, do you think I'm very naive for having trusted him?" "Samantha, trusting the people we love isn't naivete. It's humanity. David exploited that humanity, but that says something terrible about him, not about you. I lost 2 years of my life, 1,500 of my savings, and almost destroyed our relationship. But you gained something invaluable, knowledge about your own strength and about what a true love is really worth. How can you forgive me so easily after all the horrible things I said to you? Because you're my daughter, and a father's love doesn't falter with temporary storms." That night, while Samantha slept in her old room for the last time before definitively returning to her apartment, I reflected on the last 2 months. We had lost money, time, and emotional peace, but we had gained something much more valuable: the opportunity to rebuild our relationship on more solid and honest foundations. David had tried to destroy our family for personal gain, but he had inadvertently strengthened the bonds that truly mattered. The predator had been caught, and we had survived, stronger than ever. July 2024. 4 months had passed since David's arrest, and life had taken on a completely different rhythm than the one I knew before this experience. I found myself sitting on my back porch on a Saturday afternoon, watching the golden sun filter through the leaves of the old oak tree that Eleanor had planted when Samantha was just a child. The transformation had not been immediate or easy. The first days after David's arrest were strange, filled with a silence I didn't know whether was peace or emptiness. Samantha had returned to her work routine, but we both needed time to process everything that had happened and redefine who we were after this storm. My first step toward personal renewal came unexpectedly. On April 15th, exactly 5 days before what would have been the cancelled wedding date, I received a call from Charles Baker, an old college friend I had lost touch with over a decade ago. "Ethan, I accidentally heard about what you went through with Samantha," Charles told me during our first phone conversation in years. "I want you to know that I really admire the courage you had to face that situation." Courage? Sometimes I think it was just stubbornness. No, friend. I know fathers who would have closed their eyes to the obvious signs just to avoid family conflict. What you did required a lot of guts. Charles invited me to join him in an activity I had never considered: street photography. Every Sunday morning, a group of retirees and mature professionals met in different New York neighborhoods to capture the city's daily life through their camera lenses. My first session was in Central Park on Sunday, April 21st. I brought a basic digital camera I had bought years ago to document construction projects but rarely used for creative purposes. "Photography teaches you to see the world differently," explained Maria Rodriguez, a 58-year-old widow who had joined the group after losing her husband to COVID-19. When you look through the viewfinder, you force yourself to focus your attention on the present moment, not the past or the future. Those words resonated deeply with me. For months, I had been trapped between the pain of the recent past and anxiety about the future of my relationship with Samantha. Photography became my anchor to the present. My first pictures were clumsy, unbalanced compositions, incorrect exposures, imprecise focus. But gradually, Sunday after Sunday, I began to develop a sharper eye for capturing meaningful moments. An old man feeding pigeons by the lake, a young couple sharing a pretzel on a bench, children running after soap bubbles that shone like tiny rainbows. In May, Samantha noticed the change in my attitude during one of our weekly dinners, a tradition we had established to gradually rebuild our communication. "Dad, you have a different energy lately," she observed as we shared a tuna casserole in my kitchen. "It's like you've found something that makes you genuinely happy." Photography has given me a new perspective on many things, I confessed. When you're behind the camera, you learn that beauty is often found in unexpected places, even in situations that initially seem chaotic or painful. Samantha smiled with a warmth I hadn't seen in her eyes since before she met David. "Are you referring to our situation?" "Among other things, yes. For months, I saw our crisis as a family tragedy. Now I understand it as a growth opportunity that neither of us would have chosen, but that both of us needed." My second revitalizing activity came through Charles, who also belonged to a chess club called the Golden Pawn, located in a cozy venue in the Greenwich Village neighborhood. On Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, men and women of all ages gathered to play games, analyze strategies, and enjoy conversations that went far beyond the board. "Chess is the most democratic sport there is," explained one Andrew Peterson, a 71-year-old retired professor who had become my unofficial mentor. "Your age, physical condition, or economic status don't matter. Only how you think and how you plan matters." The first few weeks were humbling. I lost game after game against opponents who seemed to see 5 moves ahead while I could barely plan the next one. But gradually, my game improved, and more importantly, my strategic analysis ability sharpened. "You know what I like about your playing style?" Andrew commented after a particularly close game in June. "You're very patient. You don't rush to attack. You prefer to build solid positions and wait for the right moment to act." I guess that reflects how I handled the situation with Samantha, I reflected. I could have emotionally exploded when I discovered David's lies, but I chose to carefully document everything and act calculatedly. Exactly. Chess teaches us that the best victories are not the fastest, but the most complete. While I rediscovered dormant passions, Samantha also experienced her own transformation. She had decided to seek psychological therapy to process the emotional manipulation she had suffered, a decision that initially worried me but proved to be profoundly healing. The therapist helped me understand that I wasn't a victim because I was stupid or naive, Samantha told me during one of our June dinners. I was a victim because David was an expert manipulator who studied my emotional vulnerabilities and systematically exploited them. Do you feel better understanding that? Much better. For weeks, I tortured myself thinking about all the signs I had ignored, but the reality is that David was incredibly skilled at hiding his true nature. Even you, who have much more life experience, needed concrete, documentary evidence to be completely sure of his lies. Professionally, Samantha had made a brave decision. She used her remaining savings to enroll in an evening advanced accounting course with the goal of improving her job prospects and increasing her economic independence. I don't want to be in a position where I depend financially on anyone again, not even you, Dad, she explained with determination. I want to know that I can fully support myself. That sounds excellent to me, but I hope you know that you will always have my support if you need it. I know, and I appreciate it. But the difference is that now it will be my choice to ask you for help, not a desperate need. In July, we received news about David's trial. Inspector Moreno informed us that given the overwhelming evidence presented, David had accepted a plea agreement to avoid a public trial that would have exposed even more victims. He will receive 3.5 years in prison, plus the obligation of financial restitution to all identified victims, the inspector explained to us. In addition, he will be registered in databases that will significantly hinder him from repeating these patterns in the future. Curiously, the news of his conviction did not generate vengeful satisfaction. Rather, I felt a sense of calm closure, like when you finish reading a disturbing but necessary book. How do you feel about David now? I asked Samantha after the inspector left. Strangely, I feel pity for him, she replied after reflecting. Not romantic pity, but human pity. It must be terrible to live without the ability to genuinely love another person. That answer confirmed to me that Samantha had achieved an emotional maturity that David had ironically helped catalyze. If you're watching this video, please subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. The most significant transformation in our lives came in late July, when Samantha met Alex Rodriguez, a classmate in her accounting course. Alex was a 34-year-old man, divorced, with an 8-year-old son, who worked as a supervisor at a logistics company. He's completely different from David, Samantha told me after their third date. He's calm, honest about his finances, and openly talks about his divorce and his son. There are no mysteries or contradictory stories. Do you like him? I like his emotional stability. I don't feel like I have to prove anything or hide anything when I'm with him. I met Alex during a family dinner in August. He was a simple, straightforward man who spoke with genuine affection about his son and showed obvious respect for Samantha. There were no grand gestures or exaggerated romantic promises, just a solid and reliable presence. Mr. Miller, Samantha told me what you went through with her ex-fiancé, Alex told me during our first private conversation. I want you to know that I completely understand why you were so protective. In your place, I would have done exactly the same thing. Does it not bother you that Samantha has a father who gets involved in her relationships? On the contrary, it reassures me to know that she has a family who loves her enough to make difficult decisions when necessary. That response immediately won me over. In September, as I reviewed the photographs I had taken during the summer, I realized that many captured moments of renewal. Green shoots emerging from the urban asphalt, old buildings being restored, people of all ages starting new adventures in parks and squares. Without realizing it, I had been documenting my own process of rebirth. One October afternoon, Samantha and I visited Eleanor's grave together for the first time since before the crisis with David. We brought fresh flowers and sat in silence for several minutes, each lost in our own thoughts. Do you think Mum would have handled the situation differently? Samantha finally asked. Your mother had an extraordinary intuition for reading people, I reflected. she probably would have detected something suspicious about David from the beginning. But as for the difficult decisions, I think we would have acted as a team, just as we did with all the important challenges of your upbringing. Do you think she would be proud of how we handled this? I looked at the marble tombstone, where Eleanor's name was engraved along with a phrase we had chosen together. True love transcends time. I think she would be proud that we learned to distinguish between love and manipulation, between generosity and exploitation, between family unity and toxic dependency. Now, as I write these reflections in my personal diary, I can affirm with certainty that the most difficult months of our lives paradoxically became the most transformative. We lost $37,000 between cancellations, penalties, and Samantha's personal savings. We lost 2 years of hopeful planning and months of emotional peace. We lost the blind confidence that good intentions always yield good results, but we gained something invaluable: the wisdom to recognize the difference between authentic love and expert manipulation, the strength to make painful but necessary decisions, and the deep understanding that protecting those we love sometimes requires being the temporary villain in their stories. Samantha has become a stronger, more independent woman, more aware of her own worth. I have rediscovered passions I thought were lost forever, and have found a community of genuine friends in people I never would have met without this crisis. Our father-daughter relationship, which David tried to destroy for his personal gain, emerged stronger and more honest than ever. At 65, I learned that it's never too late to reinvent oneself, to find new sources of joy, and to build meaningful friendships based on shared interests rather than family obligations. David Foster taught us, unintentionally, that true love sometimes requires war, that generosity without limits can become complicity with abuse, and that emotional predators can only operate in the darkness of family secrecy. In the end, the man who tried to steal our money, our peace, and our family unity ended up giving us the opportunity to discover who we really were when all the illusions were stripped away and all the truths were revealed. If I could send a message to other parents facing similar situations, it would be this: trust your instincts, document everything carefully, and never allow the fear of temporary conflict to dissuade you from protecting your children's long-term well-being. Because in the end, as the inscription on Eleanor's tomb says, true love transcends time, crises, and even the most painful betrayals. And that love, when genuine, always finds a way to triumph.